What if I told you that long before satellites, passports, or even the idea of countries as we know them, our world was already deeply connected? Think about it. Centuries ago, vibrant empires like Rome and Persia, the Maya and Han China, weren't isolated giants. They were linked by a hidden web of roads, trails, and sea routes that carried more than just merchants and soldiers. They carried ideas. They carried faith. They carried the very pulse of human civilization. These forgotten pathways acted like ancient internet networks, buzzing with the exchange of everything from silk and spices to languages and beliefs, knitting together continents in ways we're only now beginning to fully appreciate. These routes were the original global connectors, secret, daring, and astonishingly advanced. Picture a trader setting out from China, not knowing if they'd ever return, carrying bolts of silk that would eventually clothe Roman emperors. Imagine a messenger sprinting along a Persian royal road, relay to relay, covering distances in days that would take others weeks. Envision Maya engineers building raised stone causeways through dense rainforests, or camel caravans braving the Sahara's burning expanse. This was a world without borders, a world where movement meant life and connection meant power. These pathways didn't just facilitate trade, they enabled cultural revolutions, sparked golden ages, and laid the groundwork for the world we live in today. In this video, we're going to uncover 22 of these incredible forgotten pathways, each with its own story of adventure, innovation, and human spirit. We'll travel from the snowy passes of the Inca roads to the maritime spice routes of the Indian Ocean, from the amber trails of northern Europe to the river networks of ancient Mississippi. Together, we'll explore how these routes shaped empires, spread religions, swapped technologies, and quietly built the foundations of our modern globe. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey back to a time when the world felt both vast and intimately connected. And it's a powerful reminder of what we can achieve when we reach beyond what's familiar. So come with me, let's step out onto these ancient trails and discover the echoes of a world that knew no borders. But to truly grasp the significance of these ancient highways, we need to step back and picture the world they operated in, a world utterly different from our own. This was an age long before the concept of a fixed, guarded national border even existed. Empires didn't expand by drawing lines on a map. They grew through dynamic forces like trade, military conquest, and intricate diplomacy. Their influence radiated outward along these very pathways, which acted less like simple roads and more like pulsating arteries, carrying the lifeblood of civilization between distant hearts. For nearly 3,000 years, from around 2000 BCE well into the medieval period, this was how the world worked. It was a sprawling, organic network of connection. Imagine silk from China changing hands countless times before gracing a Roman noblewoman, or spices from the Moluccas igniting culinary revolutions in Europe centuries later. These routes were conduits for far more than luxury goods. They were the original information superhighways. Technologies like papermaking and gunpowder moved along them. Major world religions, including Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, found new audiences and spread their teachings because these paths existed. This was a form of proto-globalization, a deeply interconnected world that challenges our modern notion of isolated ancient cultures. Consider the sheer logistical brilliance of the Roman Empire's road network, with its meticulously laid stones and way stations, allowing legions and messages to move with stunning speed. Or think about the Mongol Empire's Yam system, a relay of horse stations that couriers could use to traverse thousands of miles in a matter of days, binding a vast territory together through communication. These systems provided a framework for stability and enabled an incredible diffusion of culture, art, and ideas. They fostered not just economic growth, but also a rich, often surprising, cross-cultural dialogue. Understanding this broader context is absolutely essential. It transforms these pathways from mere historical curiosities into the fundamental infrastructure of the ancient world. They were the tools that built empires, the channels that spread innovations, and the threads that wove together the human story. This background sets the stage for our journey, allowing us to fully appreciate the monumental role each individual route played. With this bigger picture in mind, we can now begin our countdown with perhaps the most famous of them all. And so we arrive at the first and perhaps most iconic of these ancient superhighways, the Silk Road. But to call it a single road is a vast oversimplification. It was more like a sprawling, ever-shifting web of overland trails and maritime passages, a dynamic network that for centuries linked the celestial empires of the East with the mighty realms of the West. Its name, coined by a 19th-century German geographer, focuses on the most famous commodity, silk, that shimmering, luxurious fabric so coveted by Roman aristocrats that the Senate repeatedly issued edicts trying to ban its import, fearing it was draining the empire of its silver. But silk was merely the headline act in a much larger, continuous performance of exchange that moved across continents. The scale of this network is almost incomprehensible. Imagine a journey of over 4,000 miles stretching from the ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an all the way to the bustling ports of the Mediterranean. This wasn't a single paved path but a series of grueling routes that snaked through some of the most treacherous geography on Earth. Travelers faced the searing, waterless Taklamakan Desert, a name that famously translates to "you go in but you won't come out," and then the towering, icy passes of the Pamir Mountains. Survival depended on a chain of oasis towns that blossomed into thriving cosmopolitan centers precisely because of their location on this route. Places like Samarkand, with its turquoise-domed mosques and vibrant bazaars, became melting pots where Persian, Indian, Chinese, and Greek cultures met, mingled, and did business. And then there was Constantinople, the glorious gateway between Europe and Asia, where goods and ideas were repackaged and sent onward to the rest of the known world. But to focus solely on material goods is to miss the Silk Road's true, world-altering impact. This was the original information superhighway. Buddhist monks from India hitchhiked on merchant caravans, carrying their scriptures into Central Asia and China, where the faith would take root and flourish. Nestorian Christians traveled eastward, establishing communities deep within the Tang dynasty. Technologies, arguably even more valuable than silk, moved along these routes. The Chinese secrets of papermaking journeyed west, eventually revolutionizing communication and record-keeping in Europe. Similarly, gunpowder, first developed for fireworks, would follow the same paths and later transform warfare across the globe. Even crops were exchanged. Grapes went east to China, while oranges and peaches traveled west. The legacy of the Silk Road is not confined to history books. Its spirit of interconnection echoes in modern initiatives like China's Belt and Road Project, which seeks to build a new web of global trade and infrastructure. It reminds us that globalization is not a modern invention but an ancient human impulse. The Silk Road stands as a powerful testament to our enduring desire to reach beyond the horizon, to trade, to learn, and to connect. It wasn't just a route for silk. It was the pathway that helped weave the very fabric of human civilization, blending East and West into a richer, more interconnected world. While the Silk Road captures our imagination with its vast scale and exotic goods, our next pathway showcases a different kind of ancient genius, the breathtaking efficiency of imperial administration. Imagine the challenge facing King Darius I of Persia in the 5th century BCE. He ruled over an empire of staggering diversity, stretching from the Nile River in Egypt to the Indus River in modern-day Pakistan. Governing such a vast and varied territory required more than just a powerful army. It demanded a system of communication so fast and reliable that the king's word could travel faster than rumor or rebellion. The answer to this monumental challenge was the Royal Road, a true marvel of organizational engineering that would put many modern systems to shame. This was no meandering trade path. The Royal Road was a purpose-built, meticulously maintained highway spanning over 1,500 miles. Its route was strategically planned, connecting the administrative capital of Susa, nestled in the heart of modern-day Iran, with the wealthy western satrapy or province of Lydia and its capital, Sardis, in what is now Turkey. The road was more than just a dirt track. It was equipped with way stations, rest stops, and guard posts at regular intervals. But its most revolutionary feature was its state-run courier service, a system so effective it was immortalized by the Greek historian Herodotus. In his writings, he delivered what is perhaps history's most famous fan letter to a postal service, declaring, "There is nothing in the world that travels faster than these Persian couriers." His astonishment was warranted. These riders, known as Angarium, operated like a well-oiled machine. A single messenger would not ride the entire, grueling distance. Instead, he would carry his message at a gallop to the next relay station, where a fresh rider and a fresh horse were waiting, ready to take the baton and continue the journey without a single moment of pause. This relay system meant a message could traverse the entire length of the empire, a journey that would take an ordinary traveler 3 months in just 7 to 9 days. The impact of this speed cannot be overstated. For the emperor in Susa, it meant he could receive intelligence from his farthest provinces and dispatch orders almost in real time, allowing him to project power and maintain control with an iron grip. An uprising in Sardis could be reported, and a legion of soldiers dispatched from the capital before the rebellion could even fully organize. But to view the Royal Road solely as a tool of military and political control is to see only half of its story. This streamlined, safe, and well-patrolled highway became a powerful economic engine. With the king's peace enforced along its length, merchants and their caravans flocked to it. Textiles, metals, grains, and luxury goods began flowing seamlessly between the rich cultures of Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Iranian plateau. The road didn't just carry the king's commands, it carried the wealth of nations, fostering economic interdependence that further cemented the empire's unity. The brilliance of the Persian system was not lost on future empires. The Romans, who were masters of adopting and improving upon the innovations of others, looked directly to the Royal Road when building their own famed network, the Cursus Publicus. The core principle, a relay of messengers and dedicated stations for official travel, became the backbone of administration for centuries of imperial rule. The Royal Road, therefore, stands as a timeless testament to a simple truth. Information is power, and the speed of its delivery can determine the fate of an empire. It was the internet of its age, a physical network that proved infrastructure is not just about moving armies, but about moving ideas, commands, and commerce at a pace that can defy distance itself. Leaving behind the vast, sun-baked highways of Persia, we now journey across the globe to the dense, emerald rainforests of Mesoamerica, where an entirely different kind of pathway reveals the genius of the ancient Maya. While the Royal Road was an instrument of imperial command, the Maya Sacbyob were the lifeblood of a civilization built on a network of powerful, independent city-states. Imagine not a single, centralized empire, but a constellation of brilliant capitals like Tikal, Calakmul, and Qhapaq, each vying for influence, yet bound together by a sophisticated web of these raised stone causeways. The word Sacbyob literally means white roads, a name they earned from their gleaming limestone plaster surface that would have shimmered under the tropical sun, cutting a stark, elegant line through the deep green of the jungle. The engineering behind these roads is a testament to Maya ingenuity in the face of a challenging environment. This wasn't dry, arid land where a simple path would suffice. This was a region subjected to torrential seasonal rains that would have turned any ordinary trail into an impassable quagmire. The Maya solution was both simple and brilliant. They built up, constructing a foundation of large stones, then layering SMALLER Chinese letter and gravel. They capped the entire structure with a smooth layer of white lime plaster that was both durable and slightly curved. This curvature was crucial. It acted as a drainage system, allowing rainwater to run off quickly and keeping the roadbed solid and dry year-round. Some of these Sacbyob were intimate, local pathways connecting a central temple complex to an outlying village. But others were truly monumental public works projects, with the longest known Sacbyob stretching over 62 miles from Qhapaq to the distant site of Yaxuna. To accomplish this through dense, predator-filled jungle without the use of the wheel or metal tools required not just engineering skill, but tremendous political will and organizational power. These white roads were far more than just practical infrastructure. They were the social and economic arteries of the Maya world. Along their smooth surfaces traveled a constant flow of people and goods that fueled their civilization. Economically, they enabled the trade of highly prized commodities. Jade, mined from distant riverbeds and revered for its spiritual value, was transported to be carved into elaborate ornaments for the elite. Razor-sharp obsidian, essential for ritual bloodletting and everyday tools, was traded from its volcanic sources. And perhaps most importantly, cacao beans, which were used as currency itself, moved along these routes, allowing for a complex economy to flourish. But the traffic wasn't just commercial. The Sacbyob were also sacred pathways. During important dates in the Maya calendar, you would have witnessed grand religious processions, with priests and nobles traveling from one city to another to participate in ceremonies or make offerings at sacred shrines. They were also diplomatic highways. Envoys carrying messages between rival kings would have used these roads, their journey smoothed by the peace that was traditionally accorded to travelers on a Sacbyob. This constant movement helped to create a shared Maya culture, a common set of religious beliefs, artistic styles, and calendrical systems even amongst cities that were often at war. The Sacbyob didn't erase political boundaries, but they ensured that ideas, styles, and innovations could flow across them, maintaining a cultural cohesion that defined the Maya world for centuries. This hidden network completely shatters any old-fashioned notion of isolated, Stone Age tribes lost in the jungle. Instead, it reveals a landscape as interconnected and dynamically engaged as any in the ancient world. A true testament to a civilization that mastered its environment to build a web of connection. From the humid, enclosed world of the Maya Sacbyob, we now turn to one of the most awe-inspiring feats of human endurance, the conquest of the world's greatest desert. The Trans-Saharan trade routes represent a breathtaking defiance of geography, a story not of stone roads through jungle, but of shifting sands navigated by memory and the incredible endurance of the camel. For over 1,000 years, these networks of trails turned the Sahara from a barren, impenetrable barrier into a vibrant, liquid highway of commerce and culture, connecting worlds that otherwise would have remained forever apart. The engine of this transformation was a single, revolutionary adaptation, the camel. Introduced to North Africa around the 3rd century CE, these ships of the desert were perfectly engineered for the challenge. Their ability to travel for days without water, their broad, splayed feet that kept them from sinking into the sand, and their capacity to carry heavy loads made the impossible possible. But a single camel was not enough. The true innovation was the caravan, massive, organized trains of hundreds, sometimes thousands of these animals, led by Berber nomads whose intimate knowledge of the desert was their most valuable commodity. These guides could read the stars for navigation, identify subtle changes in the sand that indicated a safe path, and knew the location of every critical oasis and water hole. The journey itself was a monumental undertaking. A single round trip from Sijilmasa in Morocco to the fabled city of Timbuktu could take over 3 months. Travelers faced scorching daytime heat, freezing nights, blinding sandstorms, and the constant threat of getting lost in a landscape with no landmarks. The rewards, however, were literally worth their weight in gold. The fundamental economic driver was a simple exchange of 2 vital resources that each side had in abundance and the other desperately needed. From the rich forest and savanna regions south of the Sahara came immense wealth, gold from the mines of Wangara, which would eventually underpin the currencies of Mediterranean empires, ivory from elephants, and the kola nut, a prized stimulant. Northbound caravans carried these luxuries. Heading south, the caravans brought something just as crucial: salt, mined from the great deposits at places like Tagheza, where buildings were even made of salt blocks. This mineral was essential for preserving food and replacing nutrients lost through perspiration in the humid south. It was so valuable that pound for pound, it could be traded for an equal weight of gold on the southern frontiers. This exchange fueled the rise of some of history's most magnificent and wealthy empires. The Empire of Ghana, known as the Land of Gold, grew powerful by taxing the goods that crossed its territory. Later, the Mali Empire, with its legendary ruler Mansa Musa, derived its almost mythical wealth directly from its control over these Trans-Saharan trade routes. But the caravans carried far more than just commodities. They were the primary vector for the spread of Islam into West Africa, not through conquest but through gradual cultural and intellectual exchange. This is best embodied by the destiny of certain oasis towns. A modest trading post like Timbuktu was transformed into a legendary center of global learning. Its universities and libraries attracted scholars from across the Muslim world, and its scribes produced countless manuscripts on astronomy, law, medicine, and philosophy, creating a scholarly tradition that rivaled any in the world at the time. The journey of a single caravan thus encapsulates this incredible duality: the southbound camels laden with salt and Islamic texts, the northbound ones carrying gold and students seeking knowledge. This network didn't just trade goods, it traded ideas, faith, and knowledge, weaving together Arab, Berber, and a multitude of sub-Saharan African cultures into a new, sophisticated tapestry. It stands as a powerful testament to the fact that the most formidable barriers, whether deserts, mountains, or oceans, are no match for the human drive to connect, trade, and understand one another. Now, let's shift our gaze eastward to a pathway that is not merely a road, but a living chronicle of the Indian subcontinent itself, a route so ancient and so deeply embedded in the fabric of history that it seems to pulse with the footsteps of emperors, poets, and pilgrims. This is the Grand Trunk Road, a name that barely captures its monumental significance. For over 2.5 millennia, this highway has been the unwavering spine of the region, a colossal artery that has connected the lush, river-fed plains of Bengal in the east with the rugged, mountainous passes of Afghanistan in the west. Its story is not the story of a single empire, but of every great power that ever sought to unify this vast and diverse land, from the Mauryans and the Guptas to the mighty Mughals and finally the British Raj. Each successive civilization recognized its strategic value, not just paving over the existing path but expanding and enhancing it, layer upon historical layer, creating a palimpsest of power and connection. To travel its length was to take a journey through the very heart of the subcontinent, a microcosm of its incredible diversity. A merchant setting out from the eastern terminus would hear the gentle cadence of Bengali, his cart laden with the finest muslin cloth, a fabric so delicate it was said to be woven from air. As he moved west, the languages and landscapes would shift around him. The earthy tones of Bhojpuri, the holy chants from the Ghats of Varanasi, the bustling commerce of Mughal capitals like Delhi and Agra. His goods would change too. Perhaps he would trade his textiles for the spices of Punjab or the precious stones from the northwestern mines. The road was a grand unifier, but it was also a stage for dramatic historical encounters. It was along this very route that Alexander the Great and his Macedonian armies marched, their clash with King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes becoming the stuff of legend. Centuries later, it would facilitate the spread of Buddhism as missionaries carried the teachings of the Buddha to new lands, and still later, it would see the majestic processions of Mughal emperors like Sher Shah Suri, who is often credited with formalizing the road's structure, planting shade trees and building sarais or rest houses every few miles to offer shelter to weary travelers. This constant flow of humanity made the Grand Trunk Road the ultimate melting pot. It was a river of culture where languages intermingled, religious ideas were exchanged at wayside shrines, and culinary traditions blended in the bustling marketplaces that sprang up along its length. Its profound impact on Indian life was immortalized by the Nobel laureate Rudyard Kipling, who called it such a river of life as exists nowhere else in the world, a road where all India is at traffic. That legacy is still visible today. If you were to trace the modern National Highway 1 from Howrah to Peshawar, you are, in many stretches, driving directly atop the ancient foundation of the Grand Trunk Road. You pass the same ancient cities, you cross the same rivers, and you feel the same sense of endless movement and commerce. It stands as a powerful, enduring symbol of continuity, a testament to the idea that while empires rise and fall, the pathways that connect us, the shared routes of trade, ideas, and people, possess a permanence that can outlast any border, any dynasty, any single era in history. Leaving behind the sun-scorched sands of the Sahara, we now ascend into the breathtaking, cloud-piercing realm of the Andes Mountains, home to one of history's most audacious and awe-inspiring infrastructural achievements. Imagine the challenge, uniting an empire longer than the entire continental United States, a territory of impossible geography that included the world's second-highest mountain range, deep ravines, active volcanoes, and dense coastal deserts. For the Inca, this wasn't an obstacle, it was an opportunity. Their solution was the Qhapaq, or Royal Road, a masterwork of engineering and political will that stands as a stunning testament to human ingenuity in the face of nature's most formidable barriers. This was not a single path but a vast, interconnected network of over 25,000 miles of roadways, a distance that could literally stretch around the entire planet. To put that in perspective, the famed Roman road system, at its absolute peak, covered about 50,000 miles, but it was built over centuries across the relatively gentle landscapes of Europe. The Inca accomplished their feat in less than a century, conquering some of the most rugged terrain on Earth, they didn't just build trails, they sculpted the mountainside itself. In steep slopes, they carved elegant stone staircases that seemed to melt into the rock. Across barren desert coasts, they erected low walls to mark the path and prevent drifts of sand from obscuring it. Their most brilliant solutions were for crossing the deep gorges that slice through the Andes. They constructed suspension bridges made from woven iku grass, a material far stronger than it appears. These cables, thick as a human body, were braided by specialized communities whose sole duty was to maintain this vital infrastructure. Every year, the old bridge was ceremonially cut down and a new one woven in its place, a ritual that ensured safe passage and symbolized the renewal of the empire's bonds. The true power of this network, however, lay not in the stone but in the system that ran upon it. The lifeblood of the Inca Empire was communication, and it flowed through a core of elite relay runners known as the chasquis. Positioned at small stone huts called tambos spaced every few miles along the routes, these highly trained men were the human internet of the Andes. A message, often encoded in a complex knotted string recording device called a quipu, would be passed from one runner to the next. Each chasqui would sprint at high altitude to the next tambo, relay the information verbally and through the quipu, and then the next runner would take off. It's calculated that this system could move a message, whether a military alert, a crop report, or a royal command, at a staggering pace of over 150 miles a day. Fresh fish from the Pacific coast could be delivered to the Inca ruler high in the capital of Cusco, over 250 miles away, in under 48 hours. This incredible speed allowed the Inca, who had no wheeled vehicles or horses, to administer their vast realm with a startling degree of control and efficiency, moving troops to quell rebellions and redistributing goods from regions of plenty to those in need. The Qhapaq was far more than a tool of administration. It was the very cord that bound the empire's diverse cultures together. Along its routes traveled not just soldiers and messengers, but pilgrims heading to sacred sites, colonists moving to new lands, and llamas carrying loads of textiles, potatoes, and coca leaves. It facilitated the spread of the Quechua language and Inca religious beliefs, integrating dozens of distinct ethnic groups into a single, cohesive state. The most famous destination on this network today, the breathtaking citadel of Machu Picchu, was itself only accessible via a branch of the Inca Road, a fact that underscores how every part of the empire, even the most remote spiritual retreat, was connected to the whole. The Spanish conquistadors, recognizing the road's power as a symbol and tool of Inca authority, deliberately targeted it for destruction, allowing many bridges to decay and building their own cities away from its path. Yet the Qhapaq never fully vanished. Today, hikers from around the world trek surviving segments, and its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site ensures that this monumental achievement, a highway system built without iron, wheel, or draft animal, will forever be remembered as one of humanity's greatest engineering triumphs, a powerful reminder that connection can be woven even across the roof of the world. While the Inca roads demonstrate the power of an empire to conquer mountains, our next pathway reveals how a single, mystical commodity could inspire trade networks spanning entire continents. This is the story of the Amber Road, a route born not from imperial decree, but from desire, the deep, almost magical allure of a substance that washes up on shores, golden and warm to the touch. Long before it was a formal road, this was a corridor of commerce, a meandering path that connected the foggy, pine-forested coasts of the Baltic Sea with the sun-drenched palaces of the Mediterranean world. For over 2 millennia, from as early as 2000 BCE, this network of river routes and forest trails served as a vital artery, proving that even in the deepest antiquity, luxury and beauty could motivate connections across unimaginable distances. prize was amber, or as the ancient Greeks called it, electron, a name that hints at its mystical properties when rubbed with cloth. It generates static electricity, a seemingly magical trait that fascinated early thinkers. But its value went far beyond physics. To the civilizations of the Mediterranean, this gold of the north was a substance of legend. They spun tales of it being the petrified tears of the gods or the hardened rays of the setting sun. The Romans, in particular, developed an insatiable appetite for it. Elite Roman women coveted amber jewelry, while wealthy households displayed intricately carved amber figurines and ornaments as the ultimate symbol of status and sophistication. Pliny the Elder even wrote that a small amber figurine could cost more than a healthy, living slave. This demand in the south created a powerful economic pull that reached all the way to the Baltic coast, the world's primary source of this precious fossilized resin. The journey of a single piece of amber from its origin to a Roman noble's villa is a story of countless hands and daring enterprise. It likely began with a Baltic tribesman collecting it along the shore after a storm. From there, it would have been traded locally, then begun its long voyage south. The route was not a single paved highway, but a chain of connections. It likely followed the great rivers of Europe, the Vistula, the Oder, and the Elbe, acting as natural waterways for rafts and small boats loaded with goods. At certain points, the precious cargo would be transferred to overland carts or pack animals to cross divides between river systems. This was a relay race of commerce, with the amber passing from one middleman to the next. Germanic and Celtic tribes acted as crucial intermediaries, controlling stretches of the route and facilitating the exchange. They didn't just move amber, they added their own goods to the flow, valuable furs from northern animals, honey, and metals like tin from local mines. The Amber Road was never a one-way street. It was a vibrant, multi-lane exchange of northern resources for southern luxuries. The impact of this trade was profound, creating a cultural and economic dialogue between worlds that knew very little about each other. In the north, the tribes gained access to Mediterranean goods like fine pottery, bronze vessels, and wine, enriching their own cultures. In the south, amber became deeply embedded in society. Beyond jewelry, it had practical and religious uses. Romans believed amber amulets could protect children from illness, and it was burned as incense in religious ceremonies for its sweet, piney scent. The most stunning archaeological evidence of its reach comes from the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, where his burial mask is inlaid with Baltic amber, proving that this northern treasure had found its way to the most powerful courts in the ancient world thousands of years before the rise of Rome. The legacy of the Amber Road is a powerful reminder that commerce has always been a primary driver of human connection, weaving together disparate cultures through the universal language of desire and value, long before any empire thought to draw a line on a map. But what happens when a pathway isn't about free-flowing exchange, but is instead designed to mark a limit, to control a frontier? Our next stop takes us to the very edge of the Roman world, to a line in the sand that was anything but simple. This is the story of the Limes Germanicus, a term that translates to Germanic frontier, but to call it a mere border is to misunderstand its profound complexity. This was not a single wall or a fence. It was a deep, multi-layered zone of control, a sprawling infrastructure project that wove together roads, fortresses, watchtowers, and river patrols along the Rhine and Danube rivers. It represented the absolute zenith of Roman military engineering and geopolitical strategy, a colossal investment meant to define where the civilized world of the empire ended and the untamed wilderness of Germania began. For centuries, it stood as the most heavily fortified border in the entire ancient world. The sheer scale of this undertaking is staggering. Imagine a continuous line stretching over 350 miles from the North Sea coast in modern-day Holland, following the winding course of the Rhine, then cutting across land to meet the upper Danube in southern Germany. This was not a natural feature, it was a manufactured boundary. In some sectors, it was a simple cleared earth berm with a wooden palisade on top. In others, it evolved into a formidable stone wall. But the wall itself was just the visible tip of the spear. Behind it lay a sophisticated support network, a military road allowing for the rapid movement of legions, a chain of over 60 major forts housing thousands of troops, and hundreds of smaller watchtowers spaced within sight of each other. From these towers, sentries maintained a constant vigil, using smoke or fire signals to relay messages of any movement across the river at breathtaking speed. The rivers themselves were patrolled by the Roman navy, the classis Germanica, whose ships acted as floating checkpoints. This system allowed a relatively small number of soldiers to monitor and control a vast frontier, a masterpiece of force multiplication. The primary purpose was undeniably military, to deter large-scale invasions from Germanic tribes, to control the movement of people and goods, and to provide a secure base for Roman legions to launch punitive campaigns into enemy territory when necessary. It was a shield, a statement of power and permanence, but a fascinating thing happens when you station thousands of soldiers in one place for generations. They need to be supplied, they develop wants and needs that local economies rush to fulfill. And so, almost paradoxically, this barrier designed to separate became one of the most vibrant zones of connection in the empire. Just behind the limes, thriving civilian settlements, or vici, sprang up around the forts. These towns were buzzing with markets where Roman merchants and Germanic traders met under the watchful eyes of the legionaries. Roman goods, fine Samian ware, pottery, glass, jewelry, and above all, wine flowed across the frontier into Germania. In return, the Romans received raw materials crucial to their economy: animal furs, amber from the Baltic, and most importantly, manpower. Many young Germanic men, drawn by the wages and the prestige, enlisted as auxiliary soldiers in the Roman army, often serving on this very frontier. After their 25 years of service, they were granted Roman citizenship and returned to their communities as agents of Roman culture. This created a unique, blended society along the limes. Archaeological digs at these sites reveal a fascinating cultural fusion. You find Roman-style villas with Germanic-style pottery inside them. You find Germanic deities being worshipped alongside Roman gods, sometimes even merged into a single hybrid deity. Latin words were absorbed into the Germanic languages, and Roman legal concepts influenced local customs. The limes did not hermetically seal two worlds off from each other. Instead, it created a controlled environment for a slow, centuries-long process of acculturation and exchange. It was a semi-permeable membrane. It filtered out large war bands but allowed the steady osmosis of people, products, and ideas. The descendants of the tribes who lived in the shadow of the limes would eventually be the very groups that moved into the empire, not just as invaders, but as people who already understood Roman ways. Today, the limes is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and walking its path, you can still see the faint outlines of forts and the mounds that were once watchtowers. It stands not as a monument to division, but to the complex, often contradictory, nature of borders themselves. It shows us that even a line drawn for defense can become a bridge for cultural conversation, proving that human connection has a stubborn way of flourishing, even in the most heavily guarded places. Now we journey to a pathway whose very name evokes a sense of regal authority and timeless purpose: the King's Highway. This was no mere trail. It was the indispensable commercial and strategic backbone of the ancient Near East, a route so vital that its course still forms the spine of the modern nation of Jordan. For over 3,000 years, this artery pulsed with the lifeblood of empires, connecting the unparalleled wealth of Egypt with the mighty realms of Mesopotamia and the Levant. It was the essential overland link between the Nile and the Euphrates, a corridor that saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each leaving their mark upon its storied path. The value of the King's Highway lay in its geography. It masterfully navigated the elevated plateau east of the Jordan River Valley and the Dead Sea, offering travelers a reliable route that avoided the harsh, unforgiving depths of the desert to the east and the challenging, politically fractured territories directly on the Mediterranean coast. This high road provided access to precious water sources and defensible positions, making it the preferred route for armies, diplomats, and most importantly, the caravans carrying the most valuable commodities of the ancient world. The most famous of these were the fragrant resins of frankincense and myrrh, harvested from the trees of southern Arabia. These substances were worth their weight in gold, essential for religious rituals, funeral rites, and medicine across Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Spices, silks, and luxury goods from even farther afield also flowed along this route, taxed and traded at a series of powerful city-states that grew immensely wealthy from their strategic locations. The most spectacular of these cities was undoubtedly Petra, the dazzling capital of the Nabatean Arabs. The Nabateans were the genius entrepreneurs of the ancient world, masters of water conservation and desert logistics who essentially built a monopoly on the incense trade. They transformed Petra from a simple oasis into a breathtaking metropolis hidden within a ring of mountains, accessible only through a narrow, winding canyon called the Siq. The approach to the city remains one of history's most dramatic reveals. The canyon walls suddenly part to frame the iconic treasury, or Al-Qasne, a magnificent temple facade carved directly into the rose-red sandstone cliff. But Petra was far more than a beautiful facade. It was a sophisticated hub of commerce and culture. The Nabateans constructed elaborate systems of channels and cisterns to capture every drop of rainwater, creating an artificial oasis in the desert that could support a large population and welcome countless caravans. Their control over the King's Highway in this region made them incredibly powerful and wealthy, a force that even the Roman Empire initially had to negotiate with rather than conquer. The highway's significance is deeply etched into religious and historical texts. It is explicitly mentioned in the Hebrew Bible's Book of Numbers, where the Israelites sought permission to travel along this King's Highway through the lands of Edom. Throughout antiquity, it served as a strategic military road for empires on the march. The Assyrians used it to launch campaigns into the Arabian Peninsula. Centuries later, the Roman Empire, upon finally annexing the Nabatean kingdom, recognized the route's immense value and paved it, incorporating it into their own vast network of roads and fortifying it with a chain of legionary forts to protect the lucrative eastern trade from desert raiders. Even after the rise of Islam, the King's Highway continued to thrive as a vital pilgrimage route for Muslims traveling from Syria to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Its endurance through the ages, serving pharaohs, Caesar, and caliphs alike, is a powerful testament to its unshakable strategic importance. It wasn't just a road, it was a constant, a geographical imperative that every rising power in the region had to control, protect, and utilize to write its own chapter in history. While the overland Silk Road conjures images of camel caravans snaking through desert dunes, an equally vast and transformative network was unfolding across the waves, a liquid highway of commerce and culture that turned the Indian Ocean into a bustling crossroads of civilizations. This was the Maritime Silk Road, a breathtakingly ambitious sea-based network that didn't just complement its terrestrial counterpart. It often surpassed it in volume, reach, and cultural impact. By harnessing the very forces of nature, ancient mariners created a web of connection that linked the imperial workshops of China with the spice gardens of Indonesia, the jewelers of India, the pearl divers of the Persian Gulf, and the ivory markets of East Africa, weaving together half the world through wind and water. The true genius of this maritime network lay in its mastery of the monsoon winds. These weren't random voyages, they were exercises in meticulous celestial scheduling. For 6 months of the year, the winds blow steadily from the southwest, and for the other 6, they reverse direction, blowing from the northeast. Ancient sailors, first the Austronesians and later Arab, Indian, and Chinese navigators, learned to read these patterns like a divine timetable. A merchant in Oman would load his dhow with frankincense and set sail with the northeast monsoon, knowing it would carry him directly to the Malabar coast of India. After trading there, he would wait for the winds to shift, catching the southwest monsoon to carry him onward to the Strait of Malacca. This predictable rhythm turned the vast, intimidating expanse of the ocean into a reliable maritime conveyor belt, enabling round trips of thousands of miles and making long-distance sea trade not just possible but profitable. The goods that traveled these routes read like a catalogue of ancient luxury and innovation. From the kilns of China came exquisite celadon and blue and white porcelain, so highly prized that it became a status symbol for elites from Java to Zanzibar. Chinese silk continued its journey by sea, often finding its way to markets the overland routes could not easily reach. In return, the forests of Southeast Asia provided rare spices that would revolutionize world cuisine: cloves, nutmeg, and pepper, which were worth their weight in gold in European markets. Indian cotton textiles, renowned for their vibrant dyes and intricate patterns, were exported in massive quantities, but the ships carried far more than just tangible goods. They were floating universities of ideas and beliefs. Buddhist monks from India traveled on these vessels, establishing monasteries and spreading their teachings throughout Southeast Asia. Later, Muslim traders from the Arabian Peninsula carried Islam to the coastal ports of India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, where it took deep root and shaped entire cultures. Perhaps the most pivotal technological exchange was the compass. Originally a Chinese invention for geomancy, its adaptation for nautical navigation revolutionized seafaring, allowing sailors to venture farther from shore with greater confidence and eventually helping to usher in the age of exploration. The heartbeats of this vast network were its port cities, which blossomed into some of the world's first truly cosmopolitan hubs. Guangzhou in southern China became a throbbing emporium where Arab traders lived in designated quarters, and a Tang dynasty superintendent of maritime trade was appointed to manage the bustling, multicultural traffic. But no port captured the spirit of the Maritime Silk Road quite like Malacca. Strategically positioned on the narrow strait between Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, it was the quintessential choke point and meeting place. Every ship traveling between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea had to pass by its shores. Here, in a vibrant, chaotic, and incredibly wealthy port, one could hear a dozen languages spoken in a single market. Chinese merchants haggled with Gujarati brokers over the price of pepper, while Javanese sailors unloaded sandalwood next to ships from Aden carrying myrrh. The city developed a unique blend of Malay, Chinese, Indian, and Islamic influences, a living testament to the power of maritime trade to create entirely new hybrid cultures. This maritime route was the undeniable precursor to our modern globalized world, a proof of concept that the oceans could unite rather than divide. Its legacy is powerfully evident today in initiatives like China's Maritime Silk Road of the 21st century, which seeks to revive these ancient connections with modern infrastructure, proving that the allure of the sea lane as a pathway to prosperity and mutual understanding is as strong now as it was 2,000 years ago. While the Amber Road and the Limes Germanicus reveal the power of desire and defense, our next pathway showcases the sheer, unstoppable force of Roman ambition to physically bind their empire together. Imagine the challenge facing Roman engineers in the 2nd century BCE. They had secured the Italian peninsula, but their gaze was fixed eastward on the rich, ancient lands of Greece, Macedonia, and beyond. A vast, often mountainous, and politically fragmented landscape separated them from their new provinces. Their solution was not just to build a road, but to drive a literal and metaphorical spear of Roman authority straight through the heart of the Balkans. This was the Via Ignatia, a monumental highway that would become the primary lifeline connecting Rome with the entire eastern half of its empire, a vital overland bridge between the Latin West and the Greek East. Stretching for over 540 miles, the Via Ignatia began at the Adriatic ports of Dyrrhachium and Apollonia in what is now Albania. From there, it embarked on a brutal and breathtaking journey eastward. Roman surveyors and engineers performed miracles to conquer the challenging Balkan terrain. The road had to carve through the rugged Pindus Mountains, cross wide, flooding rivers like the Vjosa and the Aliakman, and traverse high, wind-swept plateaus. They employed their signature engineering prowess, leveling the roadbed, paving it with large stone slabs, adding drainage ditches, and installing milestones that not marked distance, but also proclaimed the power of the emperor who commissioned them. This was no meandering trail. It was a statement in stone, declaring that no geography was too difficult for Rome to master in its quest for connectivity. This paved artery immediately became the most important route for the movement of Roman legions. It allowed for the rapid deployment of troops to quell rebellions in the east or to defend the Danube frontier from incursions. But as with all great Roman roads, its purpose quickly expanded far beyond the military. It evolved into a bustling corridor of commerce, the indispensable overland link for goods moving between Europe and Asia. Merchants from Italy could now transport wine, olive oil, and metalwork east, while luxury goods from the Silk Road's western terminals, silks, spices, and perfumes, could be efficiently carried back to the markets of the Adriatic and onward to Italy. The road breathed life into every city along its path. Thessaloniki, strategically located about halfway along the route, exploded into a metropolis of immense wealth and importance. It became a major administrative center, a thriving port, and a crucible of cultural exchange where Roman law and Greek philosophy met and melded. The Via Ignatia also became a highway of faith and ideas. In its early years, it was traveled by early Christian apostles, including perhaps St. Paul himself, who used the excellent Roman road system to spread the new religion throughout the empire. Centuries later, it would play a shocking and pivotal role during the Crusades. The armies of the First Crusade, after disastrously attempting to march through Anatolia, regrouped and used the Via Ignatia as their secure, supplied route across Europe to reach Constantinople before crossing into the Holy Land. This road, built by pagans, became a critical path for the most famous Christian military campaign in history. Its utility never truly faded. Even today, if you look at a modern map of northern Greece, you will see that the national highway and major railway lines often follow the exact course of the ancient Via Ignatia. The path chosen 2,000 years ago remains the most logical and efficient route through the region, a permanent imprint of Roman ingenuity on the landscape. It stands as a powerful example that the most enduring legacy of an empire is not always its monuments or its laws, but the physical infrastructure it leaves behind, pathways that continue to guide movement and connection long after the empire itself has faded into history. While the engineered might of the Via Ignatia showcased Roman ambition, our next pathway reveals a different kind of power altogether. The power of an idea so potent it could radiate from a single, magnificent city and shape an entire continent. Far from the Mediterranean world, in the highland valley of what is now central Mexico, arose the colossal metropolis of Teotihuacan. At its zenith around 400 CE, it was one of the largest cities on Earth, home to over 100,000 people. But its influence stretched far beyond its imposing city walls, not through military conquest in the traditional sense, but through a sophisticated and far-reaching trade network that made it the undisputed cultural and economic heart of ancient Mesoamerica for centuries. The lifeblood of this network, and indeed the source of Teotihuacan's immense wealth and power, was a single razor-sharp commodity: obsidian. The city sat atop a geological gold mine, massive deposits of high-quality volcanic glass. In a world without metal tools, obsidian was the key to everything. It was fashioned into razor-sharp blades for sacrifice and warfare, into sturdy scrapers for preparing animal hides, and into delicate tools for intricate craftwork. Teotihuacan's artisans became masters of this material, operating vast workshop complexes that produced prismatic blades on an almost industrial scale. This wasn't just a local industry, it was a global export business for the ancient world. The city's merchant class, a powerful group in its own right, organized the transportation of this precious material along well-established pathways that reached into every corner of Mesoamerica. Packed trains of porters would carry tons of raw obsidian nodules and finished blades south into the Maya lowlands, west into the Zapotec lands of Oaxaca, and east to the Gulf Coast. But these pathways were not one-way streets, they were circuits of exchange. In return for their obsidian, the Teotihuacanos received the luxury goods that fueled their status and adorned their city. From the Maya regions came precious feathers from the quetzal bird, used in magnificent headdresses, and shimmering green jade, the most sacred of all stones. From the Gulf Coast came the iridescent shells of the spiny oyster, which were intricately carved into jewelry and ornaments. Cacao beans, the source of chocolate and a form of currency, flowed in from the tropical lowlands. This constant influx of wealth allowed Teotihuacan to undertake its staggering construction projects, like the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, which still dominate the landscape today. The city itself became a must-see destination, a pilgrimage site where the elite from distant lands would travel to witness its splendor and perhaps pay homage. The most fascinating aspect of this network, however, was the export of something far more intangible than goods: culture itself. The physical movement of merchants and emissaries along these trade routes became a conduit for a powerful set of ideas and artistic styles that scholars call the Teotihuacan phenomenon. We see its impact most clearly in the distant Maya city-states. In places like Tikal and Qhapaq, Maya rulers suddenly began to adopt the imagery of Teotihuacan power. They commissioned monuments showing themselves wearing the distinctive costume of a Teotihuacan warrior, a feathered headdress, and a rectangular shield. They incorporated Teotihuacan architectural motifs, like the distinctive tallad table row style of sloping panels and vertical slabs, into their own temples. Most strikingly, they began to venerate the Teotihuacan version of the central Mexican storm god, Tlaloc, integrating him into their own complex pantheon. This was not a case of simple imitation, it was a strategic adoption. By aligning themselves with the iconography of the most powerful city in the region, these Maya kings were leveraging its prestige to bolster their own authority at home. Then, around the middle of the 6th century, something catastrophic happened. The great city of Teotihuacan experienced a rapid and violent collapse. Its major structures were systematically burned and destroyed, and its population scattered. The precise reasons remain one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. A combination of climate change, internal rebellion, and economic disruption likely played a role. With the heart of the network gone, the vast trade routes faltered. The flow of obsidian slowed to a trickle, and the cultural influence that had once been so potent simply vanished. The sudden void left by Teotihuacan's fall would reshape the political landscape of Mesoamerica for centuries to come, allowing new powers to rise. The story of its trade network is a powerful lesson in soft power. It shows us that an empire can be built not just on the sharp edge of a sword, but on the sharp edge of an obsidian blade, and that the most enduring influence often travels not with armies, but with merchants, carried along pathways of commerce and adopted willingly by those who see value in the connection. From the grand, stone-paved highways of Rome and the incense-perfumed trails of Arabia, we now venture onto a pathway defined not by stone or spice, but by grass and sky, the boundless, windswept sea of grass known as the Eurasian steppe. This was not a single, defined road, but an entire ecosystem of movement, a network of trails and seasonal migration routes that stretched an almost unimaginable 5,000 miles from the pastures of Mongolia to the very gates of Europe. For the nomadic empires that mastered this environment, the fierce Scythians, the terrifying Huns, and the world-conquering Mongols, this was not a route to be traveled occasionally. It was their whole world, a highway without borders that enabled a unique and powerful way of life. The key to unlocking the power of the steppe was a revolutionary partnership between man and animal, one that transformed these nomadic peoples into the most mobile and adaptive force the ancient world had ever seen. The horse was not merely a means of transport, it was the very foundation of their culture, their economy, and their military supremacy. From an incredibly young age, steppe children learned to ride, becoming so inseparable from their horses that ancient observers often described them as mythical centaurs. This mastery of horsemanship, combined with the invention of the compound bow, a weapon so powerful and compact it could be fired accurately from horseback at a full gallop, made their light cavalry virtually unbeatable by the slow, heavy infantry of settled empires. But their mobility went beyond warfare. Their entire society was portable. They lived in circular felt tents called yurts or jurs, which could be dismantled and loaded onto carts in under an hour. Their wealth was measured in herds of horses, sheep, and cattle, which they moved with the seasons to find fresh pasture. This incredible mobility was their ultimate survival strategy, allowing them to flee from harsh weather, evade stronger enemies, and exploit resources across a vast territory. This constant movement across the steppe corridor created a continuous, if often unseen, exchange between the distant ends of Eurasia. While they are often portrayed as simple raiders, these nomadic confederations were also sophisticated traders who understood the value of commerce. They controlled the flow of goods between the great settled civilizations of China, Persia, and Europe. Their most famous export was the very animal that gave them power, the horse. Chinese empires, desperate to counter the threat from the steppe, often traded vast quantities of silk, grain, and luxury goods for these superior steeds. From the northern forests, they acquired luxurious furs, sable, ermine, and fox, which were highly coveted in the courts of Baghdad and Constantinople. They also traded metals, both as raw ore and as finely crafted gold and silver artifacts. like the stunning Scythian animal-style jewelry found in burial mounds from Ukraine to Siberia. Perhaps the most significant exchange, however, was the silent, unintended transfer of technology and ideas that happened along this route. The stirrup, a seemingly simple invention that gave a rider unprecedented stability and leverage, likely migrated westward from the steppe, eventually revolutionizing medieval European warfare and enabling the Age of the Knight. Similarly, innovations in saddle design and tactics of mounted archery spread along these same trails, but the flow wasn't just one way. The nomads, though often dismissive of settled life, were keenly interested in the luxuries and technologies of their neighbors. They coveted Chinese silks not just for their beauty, but for their utility. Silk underwear was highly prized because if an arrow struck, the silk would often wrap around the arrowhead and allow for a cleaner, less lethal extraction. They absorbed religious ideas too. The Uyghurs adopted Manichaeism, while the Khazars famously converted to Judaism, and later, the Mongols would interact with Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians, creating a surprisingly tolerant and cosmopolitan atmosphere within their courts. The ultimate demonstration of the steppe route's power came in the 13th century under Genghis Khan. He didn't just raise an army, he unified the entire steppe ecosystem into a single, terrifyingly efficient military machine. The Mongols perfected the logistics of movement, establishing a system of relay stations, or yam, that allowed their messengers to cover up to 200 miles a day, knitting their vast empire together with a speed of communication that would not be surpassed until the invention of the telegraph. The famed Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, that followed their conquests was the direct result of this control. For the first time, the entire length of the steppe route was secured under a single authority. They suppressed banditry and standardized trade regulations, creating such a safe environment that, as one contemporary account noted, a virgin carrying a pot of gold could walk from one end of the empire to the other without being molested. This safety supercharged the Silk Road, facilitating an unprecedented exchange of goods, technologies, and people between East and West. The steppe route, often dismissed as a mere blank space on historical maps, was in fact the dynamic engine that periodically rewired the connections between civilizations, proving that power could reside not in walled cities, but in the boundless freedom of the open grassland. If the Silk Road was the internet of its day, and the steppe route a highway of nomadic power, then the incense route was something far more intimate and sensory, a pathway built not on necessity, but on devotion and desire, a river of fragrance that flowed through the harshest desert on earth to feed the soul of the ancient world. This network of trails had one singular, intoxicating purpose: to transport two of the most coveted substances in antiquity, frankincense and myrrh, from their exclusive source in the remote lands of southern Arabia to the temples, palaces, and funeral pyres of Egypt, Persia, and Rome. These were not mere commodities, they were the breath of the gods, the scent of sanctity, and their journey from tree to altar is a story of botanical mystery, breathtaking human endurance, and economics so potent they built legendary cities from the sands. The magic began in the wadis, the dry river valleys of modern-day Oman and Yemen. Here, in a harsh, arid landscape, grew the scraggly, unassuming trees of the genus Boswellia and Commiphora. Through a process that still feels almost miraculous, these trees, when wounded, weep a milky resin that hardens into tear-shaped droplets upon contact with the blistering sun. Harvesting this desert's pearl was a specialized generational skill. Tribes like the Nabateans' predecessors would make precise incisions in the bark and return weeks later to collect the hardened nuggets. The rarity of these trees, which refused to grow anywhere else in the world, and the labor-intensive harvest process, created a natural monopoly of epic proportions. The kingdoms that controlled this land, most famously Saba, the biblical Sheba, understood that they possessed a source of wealth more reliable than any gold mine. The demand for these resins was utterly insatiable. In Egypt, frankincense was burned by the ton in temples to honor Ra, the sun god, and was a crucial ingredient in the embalming process, believed to help usher the pharaohs into the afterlife. For the Romans, no religious ceremony, imperial procession, or patrician's funeral was complete without clouds of fragrant smoke, a public display of piety and immense wealth. Myrrh, with its more bitter medicinal aroma, was prized as a perfume, a painkiller, and an antiseptic, used to anoint newborns and dress the wounds of the dying. Turning this botanical treasure into economic and political power required a logistics operation of staggering ambition. The journey from the Dhofar region to the markets of Gaza on the Mediterranean coast spanned over 2,000 miles of the most unforgiving terrain imaginable, the empty quartz deserts of the Rub al-Khali, or the Empty Quarter. The only engines capable of this feat were the camel caravans, often consisting of hundreds, even thousands of animals. A single camel could carry roughly 300 pounds of resin, and a large caravan represented a movable fortune. The route was not a single path but a web of trails, strategically hopping from one precious oasis to the next. The safety and success of these caravans depended on a delicate ecosystem of treaties with local tribes, who provided guides, protection, and access to water sources in exchange for taxes and tariffs. This system transformed certain stopover points into glittering metropolises of unbelievable wealth. The most spectacular was Petra, the Nabatean capital, which we encountered earlier. But Gaza, the northern terminus of the route, became phenomenally rich simply for being the gateway where Arabian goods were transferred to Mediterranean ships. The taxes levied on this trade filled the coffers of the Sabaeans and Nabateans, allowing them to build magnificent dams, irrigate gardens in the desert, and commission stunning works of art, their power quite literally rising from the fragrant smoke of their exports. The cultural impact of this trade echoes through our oldest stories and texts. The legendary Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon, as recounted in the Hebrew Bible, the Quran, and Ethiopian tradition, was almost certainly a diplomatic mission rooted in the economics of the incense trade, a meeting between a ruler who controlled the source and a king who controlled key northern markets. The route was a conduit for more than just resins. It carried ideas, scripts, and architectural styles. The distinct, monumental architecture of the Sabaean kingdom, with its great dam at Marib, influenced styles throughout the region. However, no empire, no matter how wealthy, can hold back the tides of change forever. The dominance of the overland incense route began to wane with the ascendance of Roman naval power in the 1st century BCE. The Romans, frustrated by the exorbitant prices set by the middlemen of the desert, began to master the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean. Why pay a fortune for goods hauled across a continent when a ship could sail directly to the source or to intermediary ports, cutting out the desert merchants entirely? This shift to maritime trade, combined with the gradual conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity, which had less use for the vast pagan incense consumption of old, slowly drained the life from the overland trails. The cities that had grown fat on the caravan trade, like Petra, were gradually abandoned to the sands, their glory preserved only in legend. Yet, the legacy of the incense route is far more than ruined cities. It is woven into the very fabric of world religion, medicine, and culture. The gifts of the Magi to the infant Jesus, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were the three most valuable commodities of the age, a testament to the enduring power and symbolism of these desert resins. Their scent, once worth more than its weight in gold, still lingers in churches around the world today, a fragrant ghost of a pathway built on faith and desire. High in the mist-shrouded mountains of southwestern China, where the air grows thin and the paths cling to the sides of sheer cliffs, a different kind of exchange was taking place, one built not on gold or silk, but on a humble leaf and a powerful animal. This is the story of the Tea Horse Road, a network of trails so perilous and so vital that it bound the fate of empires to the backs of sure-footed ponies and the contents of tea bricks. For over a millennium, from the Tang dynasty onward, this was the lifeline between the fertile tea gardens of Sichuan and Yunnan and the high, demanding plateau of Tibet, a pathway forged by a simple, brilliant barter system, Chinese tea for Tibetan war horses. The driving force behind this treacherous trade was a matter of existential necessity for both sides. For the Chinese empires, particularly the Song and Ming dynasties, the constant threat of nomadic incursions from the north meant they were in a perpetual, desperate need of a strong, modern cavalry. The small, hardy horses bred on the Tibetan plateau were uniquely suited for mountain warfare, agile, resilient, and able to thrive in harsh conditions where larger Chinese breeds would falter. These were the ultimate military assets. On the other side of the equation, the Tibetan diet was heavily based on meat and dairy products from their herds of yak and sheep. The high fat and protein content of this food was essential for survival in the cold, high-altitude climate, but it was difficult to digest and lacked certain vital nutrients. The solution was tea, not just any tea, but pa tea, a fermented, compressed variety from Yunnan that was rich in tannins and enzymes that aided digestion and provided a crucial dose of vitamins. For the Tibetan people, tea became less a luxury and more a physiological necessity, a daily staple as important as barley or yak butter. This created a perfect symbiotic dependency. China needed Tibetan horses to secure its borders, and Tibet needed Chinese tea to maintain its health and way of life. The stability of both regions quite literally hinged on the success of the caravans that traversed these trails. The journey itself was a legendary feat of human and animal endurance, arguably one of the most dangerous commercial routes in history. This was not a single paved road, but a sprawling, spiderweb-like network of trails covering over 2,000 miles. The most famous branch, the Qhapaq or Tea Horse Ancient Road, snaked through some of the most dramatic and unforgiving geography on Earth. Caravans, often consisting of hundreds of mules and porters led by specialized trade guilds known as mabang, faced a gauntlet of challenges. They inched along narrow paths carved into cliff faces thousands of feet above raging rivers, their hooves kicking loose stones that would tumble into the abyss below. They crossed swinging rope bridges made of vines and woven hemp that swayed violently in the mountain winds. They battled altitude sickness, bandits, and extreme weather that could change from blistering sun to blinding snow in a matter of hours. A single trip could take up to 6 months for a round journey. The tea was transported not in loose leaves, but pressed into dense, durable bricks, which served a dual purpose. This shape made them easy to stack and strap to the sides of mules, and the bricks themselves became so stable and valuable that they often functioned as a form of currency in the remote highland regions, a tangible symbol of the economic trust that flowed along the route. Beyond the exchange of goods, the Tea Horse Road became a slow-moving river of cultural confluence. As the caravans moved back and forth, they did more than just trade. They facilitated a profound and lasting dialogue between Han Chinese, Tibetans, and the many other ethnic minority groups like the Naxi, Bai, and Yi who inhabited the regions in between. In the bustling caravan towns like Lijiang and Doli, which served as vital rest stops and trading posts, one could hear a cacophony of languages and dialects in the market squares. Tibetan horse traders bartered with Han tea merchants, while Naxi innkeepers provided shelter and supplies to all. This constant interaction led to a fascinating cultural cross-pollination. Elements of Tibetan Buddhism, such as the prayer flags that symbolized protection for travelers, began to appear along the route. Han architectural styles blended with local Tibetan and Naxi designs, creating unique hybrid buildings. Perhaps most enduringly, the tea culture itself was transformed. The Tibetan method of preparing tea, churning bricks of pu with yak butter and salt to create a rich, savory, energy-dense drink, became a defining ritual of the region, a direct result of the commodities traded on this road. The legacy of the tea horse road is far from forgotten. While modern highways and railways have supplanted the old caravan trails, the cultural and economic connections they forged remain deeply embedded. The Chinese government's Belt and Road Initiative often evokes the spirit of these ancient trade routes, seeking to build modern infrastructure along these historical corridors of exchange. In 2013, several sections of the road in Yunnan and Sichuan were collectively designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognizing its immense historical significance as a cultural route. Today, adventurous travelers can still hike remnants of the original stone-paved paths, tracing the footsteps of the porters and muleteers who once carried the fate of empires on their shoulders. The tea horse road stands as a powerful testament to how the most basic human needs, a warm drink and a means of defense, can weave together diverse peoples and landscapes, creating networks of mutual dependence that transcend political boundaries and endure for 1,000 years. While the tea horse road reveals how necessity can forge bonds across mountains, our next pathway takes us to the very bedrock of imperial ambition, to a road that was more than just a route, it was a statement of destiny. Imagine the Roman Republic in 312 BCE. It is not yet the world-spanning empire it would become. It is a powerful city-state, but its control over the Italian peninsula is still contested. To the south lie the formidable Samnites, and beyond them the wealthy, Greek-influenced cities of Magna Graecia. The need to project power into this volatile region is urgent, and the censor Appius Claudius Caecus proposes a solution so bold it would change history: a road built to military specifications that would stretch from the gates of Rome straight into the heart of enemy territory. This was the Via Appia, the Appian Way, and it was the first great highway of what would become the most extensive road network the ancient world had ever seen. The engineering behind the Via Appia was a revelation, a declaration of Roman technical superiority that would become their signature. This was not a dirt path trodden by generations of feet. It was a meticulously constructed instrument of control. Surveyors first plotted the straightest possible course, a dramatic departure from the winding trails that typically followed the natural contours of the land. This insistence on directness was psychological as much as it was practical. It showed an unwavering confidence and a refusal to be deterred by obstacles. The roadbed itself was a marvel. Workers dug a deep trench, then filled it with layer upon layer of carefully selected materials, a foundation of large stones for stability, a middle layer of smaller gravel and rubble mixed with cement for drainage, and finally, a surface of large, tightly fitted volcanic basalt slabs that were so perfectly joined a knife blade could not be inserted between them. The road was cambered, curving slightly higher in the center so that rainwater would run off into deep drainage ditches on either side, keeping the surface perpetually dry and usable in all weather. This was a road built not for years but for millennia. The immediate purpose was undeniably military. The Via Appia was a spear pointed south, It allowed Roman legions to march quickly and efficiently to the front lines during the Samnite Wars, with a smooth, hard surface that was easy on the feet and allowed for the rapid movement of supply wagons. But as Roman victory followed victory, the road's function evolved. It became the main artery for the new Roman territories, the Via Ignatia. Settlers and veterans traveling south to claim new lands used it. Merchants flocked to it, transporting the bounty of the conquered south, especially wine and olive oil, back to the insatiable markets of Rome. In return, manufactured goods from the capital flowed south, integrating the economy of the peninsula. The road itself became a linear city of the dead and the living. Just outside Rome's walls, the most powerful families built elaborate, ornate tombs lining the roadside, using the constant flow of traffic as a captive audience for their displays of wealth and status. Further out, sprawling agricultural estates or latifundia emerged, their products now easily shipped to market. The road was life, death, commerce, and power, all paved in stone. Perhaps the Via Igniatia's most enduring legacy was its role as the primary vehicle for Romanization. As soldiers, merchants, and officials moved along its length, they carried Roman culture with them. Latin replaced local Oscan and Greek dialects as the language of commerce and administration. Roman law, administered in towns now connected directly to the capital, supplanted local customs. Roman architectural styles, religious practices, and even social structures were disseminated along this paved corridor. The road physically and culturally unified the diverse peoples of Italy, transforming them from subjects into Romans. This process was so effective that by the time of the empire, an inhabitant of Capua or Brundisium considered themselves just as Roman as someone born within the city walls. The Via Ignatia demonstrated that conquest could be cemented not just by the sword, but by the shovel and the stonecutter's chisel. Its enduring fame was well-deserved. Poets dubbed it the Regina Virum, the Queen of Roads, and to this day, walking on its original stones, one can feel the immense, deliberate power of an empire being built, one meticulously laid slab at a time. It set the standard for all the roads that would follow, proving that infrastructure is the ultimate foundation of lasting power. But while the Romans built their empire with chisel and stone, another civilization was thriving thanks to a pathway provided not by human hands, but by nature itself. Imagine a world defined by a single, life-giving river, a slender green ribbon of fertility slicing through the endless, sun-bleached desert. This was the reality of ancient Egypt, and the Nile River was so much more than a source of water. It was the ultimate natural highway, a dynamic, flowing road that dictated the rhythm of life, commerce, and power for thousands of years. Flowing with a predictable, gentle current south to north, yet blessed with winds that blew almost perpetually north to south, the Nile was a two-lane superhighway engineered by the gods themselves, perfectly designed for boats to travel in either direction with effortless grace. This simple, beautiful accident of geography made the river the central nervous system of one of history's most enduring civilizations, connecting the pharaohs of Lower Egypt not only to the riches of Upper Egypt, but to the vast, mysterious lands of Nubia and the African interior. The traffic on this liquid road was constant and diverse. From the earliest dynasties, the iconic Egyptian sailing vessels, with their distinctive single mast and square sail, were a common sight. These boats were the 18-wheelers of the ancient world. They moved north, heavy with the bounty of the south, immense blocks of gold from the mines of Nubia, which would gild the tombs of pharaohs and fuel their economy, gleaming ebony wood and precious ivory from the heart of Africa, destined to be carved into exquisite furniture, statues, and ceremonial objects for the elite, and exotic animals like panthers, giraffes, and monkeys for royal. Menageries heading south, the boats carried the manufactured goods and cultural influence of the Egyptian state north: fine linens, papyrus scrolls, jewelry, weapons, and the powerful, seductive ideas of Egyptian religion and governance. This wasn't a one-way extraction. It was a complex exchange that created a deep, if often fraught, interdependence. The pharaohs didn't just send traders, they launched massive, state-sponsored expeditions, like the famous journey under Queen Hatshepsut to the land of Punt, vividly depicted on her temple walls at Deir el-Bahari, which returned laden with incense, gold, and live myrrh trees. This constant interaction along the riverine corridor didn't just enrich Egypt, it directly fostered the rise of powerful and sophisticated rival empires to its south. The kingdoms of Kush, centered first at Napata and later at Meroe, are the prime example. Initially a colony and then a conquest of the New Kingdom pharaohs, Kush absorbed Egyptian culture like a sponge. They worshipped a hybrid version of Egyptian gods, with Ammon at the head of their pantheon. They built their own pyramids at places like Nuri and El Kuru, and their rulers even styled themselves as pharaohs. But Kush was far from a simple imitation. By the 8th century BCE, the tables had turned completely. The Kushite king Pi marched his armies down the Nile, conquering a divided Egypt and establishing the 25th dynasty, ruling as pharaohs of a unified Egypt and Kush for nearly a century. This reversal of power, with the former subject now the master, is a stunning demonstration of how a shared pathway can empower all who learn to master it. Later, the Kushite capital moved to Meroe, which became a bustling industrial and cultural hub in its own right, famous for its iron production and a unique script that still baffles linguists today, all while maintaining a vibrant trade relationship with Ptolemaic Egypt and the wider Greco-Roman world via the Nile. Of course, the river was also a highway for conflict and diplomacy. Egyptian military campaigns into Nubia always followed the river, their fleets serving as floating supply depots and troop transports. The string of massive mud-brick fortresses built by Middle Kingdom pharaohs at strategic Second Cataract sites like Buhan stand as stark reminders of the Nile's role as a conduit for projecting military power. Yet, the river also carried emissaries, marriage alliances between royal families, and cultural ambassadors. The flow of ideas was constant. Egyptian religious concepts of kingship and the afterlife profoundly shaped Nubian society. In return, elements of Nubian culture, from certain musical instruments to styles of personal adornment, filtered north and were adopted by the Egyptians. This cultural blending created a unique Nilo-Sudanic sphere that was neither purely Egyptian nor purely African, but a distinct fusion born of millennia of contact along a shared aquatic highway. The enduring power of this pathway is perhaps its most remarkable feature. Thousands of years later, the Nile remains the absolute economic and social linchpin for every nation it touches. The modern cities of Cairo, Khartoum, and Aswan all owe their existence and continued prominence to the river. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone, the key to deciphering hieroglyphs, was a direct result of Napoleon's Nile campaign. And ongoing archaeological work, like the excavations at the ancient Kushite city of Kerma, continues to reveal the staggering depth and complexity of the connections that flowed along this river. The story of the Nile route is a powerful testament to the idea that geography is destiny. It reminds us that long before engineers paved over continents, the world's great natural features, its rivers, its coastlines, its mountain passes provided the original, immutable grids upon which human connection was built, fostering empires and exchanges that would shape the course of history for millennia. While the incense route moved luxury goods and the Nile carried the wealth of nations, our next pathway deals in a far more precious and fleeting commodity: information. In the vast, sprawling empire of ancient Persia, stretching from the banks of the Nile to the shores of the Indus River, the true challenge wasn't just conquering territory, but governing it. How could a king in his splendid capital of Susa possibly know what was happening in a distant province like Egypt or Bactria before it was too late to react? The Persian solution was a masterpiece of administrative genius, a system so efficient and revolutionary that it became the envy of the ancient world and the direct ancestor of every postal and information network that followed. This was the Persian Royal Mail, and it turned the empire's sprawling roads into a high-speed nervous system. The brilliance of the system, as documented by the Greek historian Herodotus, lay in its elegant relay-based design. Imagine a series of courier stations or Qhapaq, strategically positioned along the empire's meticulously maintained royal roads like the one we discussed earlier. These were not simple rest stops, they were state-run way stations staffed by dedicated personnel and stocked with fresh horses, provisions, and a constant rotation of messengers. A single messenger would not attempt the impossible feat of riding the entire, grueling distance. Instead, he would carry his dispatch at a full gallop to the next station, where a fresh rider and a fresh horse were waiting, primed and ready. The message would be handed off without a moment's pause, and the new rider would immediately sprint to the next station. This process would repeat over and over, day and night, in all weather, creating a seamless, non-stop conveyor belt for information. Herodotus himself was left in awe, famously writing that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. A tribute so enduring it was later adopted as the unofficial creed of the United States Postal Service. The impact of this speed on imperial governance cannot be overstated. For a ruler like Darius the Great, it was nothing less than a superpower. Rebellion in a far-off satrapy could be reported to the capital within days, not months, allowing a legion of soldiers to be dispatched before the insurrection could gain momentum. Tax revenues, census data, and reports on crop yields could be collected and centralized with an efficiency previously unimaginable, allowing for a level of economic planning and redistribution that stabilized the entire empire. The system also supercharged commerce. While primarily for official state business, the security and reliability of the Royal Road network, patrolled and maintained for the mail service, made it safe for merchants to travel. They could now plan their journeys with greater confidence, knowing that the king's peace was enforced along the route, and they could even use the state's infrastructure to send their own commercial intelligence ahead of their caravans. The Persian postal system didn't just carry messages, it carried the certainty and stability that are the bedrock of a thriving economy. Perhaps the most telling measure of its success is how voraciously it was copied by every subsequent major empire. The Romans, upon encountering the remnants of this system in the eastern provinces, were quick to adopt and adapt it, creating their own cursus publicus, which served the exact same purpose of binding their vast territories together with speed and efficiency. Even more strikingly, 1,000 years later and on the other side of the world, the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan developed an almost identical system called the Yam, with relay stations spaced a day's ride apart, allowing their messengers to cover even more breathtaking distances across the Eurasian steppe. The fact that the greatest logistical minds of antiquity and the Middle Ages all arrived at the same solution is a powerful testament to the Persian innovation. It proved that in the geography of power, the fastest courier holds a decisive advantage. This network was the ancient equivalent of a high-bandwidth internet connection, and it gave the Persian emperors a real-time awareness of their domain that would not be matched until the invention of the telegraph. It stands as a timeless lesson that the true strength of an empire lies not just in the size of its army, but in the speed of its information. While the main trunk of the Amber Road captured the imagination of the Mediterranean world with its tales of northern gold, a lesser-known but equally vital branch was quietly weaving its own web of connection far to the east. This was the Amber Road's northern branch, a sprawling network of river routes and forest trails that turned Eastern Europe into a dynamic crossroads, linking the amber-rich shores of the Baltic Sea with the dazzling wealth and sophistication of the Byzantine Empire on the Black Sea. This pathway didn't just move goods, it moved people, ideas, and entire cultures, playing a pivotal role in the birth of new nations during the tumultuous early medieval period. The journey began in the lands of the Baltic Prussians and other tribes, where the precious amber was gathered from the coast. From there, it entered a complex relay system that leveraged the great rivers of Eastern Europe, the Vistula, the Dnieper, and the Volkhov as natural aquatic highways. Viking traders, whom the Slavs and Byzantines called the Rus, were the master navigators of this system. They would portage their sleek longships between river systems, dragging them overland on logs to move from the Baltic watershed to the rivers that flowed south to the Black Sea. Their ultimate destination was the fabled city of Constantinople, known to them as Miklagard, the Great City. The journey was incredibly perilous, requiring them to navigate treacherous rapids on the Dnieper while fending off attacks from nomadic steppe tribes like the Pechenegs. But the rewards were worth the risk. The cargo flowing south was a testament to the vast resources of the north. Alongside the ever-present amber, the Rus traded luxurious furs, sable, marten, fox, and beaver, which were in insatiable demand among the Byzantine aristocracy to trim their robes and line their chambers. They also brought honey, a crucial sweetener and the base for mead, beeswax for church candles which burned cleaner and brighter than tallow, and tragically, slaves captured in intertribal warfare. In return, the ships heading north were laden with the splendors of the civilized south, shimmering silks, intricate gold and silver jewelry, glassware, spices, and most importantly, vast quantities of silver coinage. The Byzantine mint produced a stable, high-quality currency, and these coins flowed north in a torrent, becoming the lifeblood of the northern Amber Road's economy. This immense flow of wealth did more than just enrich individual traders. It fundamentally reshaped the political landscape. The most profound impact was on the formation of the Kievan Rus state, the precursor to modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Viking chieftains, initially drawn by the trade, began to establish control over the key points along the river routes. They built fortified settlements at strategic locations like Novgorod and Kiev, taxing the trade that passed through their territory. Over time, these Viking elites intermarried with the local Slavic nobility, gradually assimilating into the local culture while providing a framework for centralized rule. The wealth extracted from controlling the trade route funded the construction of churches, palaces, and a powerful military, transforming a loose confederation of tribes into a formidable state that could negotiate as an equal with the Byzantine Empire. The archaeological evidence for this vibrant exchange is nothing short of spectacular. All across Eastern Europe, massive hoards of Byzantine and Arabic silver coins, called dirhams, have been unearthed, often buried in ceramic pots by merchants or nobles for safekeeping. These coin hoards map the entire route of the northern Amber Road like a trail of glittering breadcrumbs. Beyond coins, excavations at sites like Staraya Ladoga and Nezdovo have revealed a fascinating blend of cultural artifacts: Norse brooches alongside Slavic pottery, fragments of Byzantine silk, and weights used by merchants for measuring silver. This material culture paints a picture of a truly multicultural world where Vikings, Slavs, Balts, and Byzantines interacted, traded, and lived alongside one another. their identities and customs blending at the bustling marketplaces that dotted the riverbanks. The story of this northern branch adds a crucial layer of depth to our understanding of medieval Europe. It moves beyond the well-trodden narratives of Western Christendom and the Mediterranean, revealing a parallel world of incredible economic and cultural dynamism in the East. This route was not a sideshow. It was a main stage where the fate of empires was negotiated with silver and sable, and where the very foundations of powerful Slavic states were laid. It underscores a vital truth that history's great connections were never limited to a single, famous road, but were instead a complex tapestry of interwoven pathways, each with its own story of adventure, exchange, and transformation. While the Persian Royal Mail and the Northern Amber Road demonstrate the power of organized states and long-distance luxury trade, our next pathway reveals a world of connection that flourished entirely independently, a continent away. Long before European explorers ever charted the Mississippi, this mighty river and its countless tributaries formed the backbone of a vast and sophisticated trading world that pulsed with the rhythm of paddle strokes. This was the Mississippi River Trade Network, a sprawling aquatic web that connected diverse Native American cultures from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes, and from the Appalachian foothills to the Great Plains. For over 800 years, this liquid highway facilitated an exchange of goods, ideas, and people that supported the rise of some of the most complex societies north of Mexico, most famously the magnificent city of Cahokia. The engine of this network was the canoe, masterfully crafted from massive logs of bald cypress or birch bark. These vessels were the lifeblood of the system, capable of carrying tons of cargo and navigating everything from the river's main powerful current to its shallow, winding tributaries. Imagine the scene: a flotilla of canoes, each manned by a crew of skilled traders, gliding silently downriver. They would have been laden with the unique specialties of their home regions. From the upper reaches near Lake Superior came raw nuggets of nearly pure copper, painstakingly mined and cold-hammered into ceremonial objects, ear spools, and weapons. From the Gulf Coast came millions of shell beads and cups, meticulously crafted from the lightning whelk and other marine mollusks, which were transformed into sacred ritual items and status symbols. From the fertile floodplains of the Mississippi itself came the agricultural surplus that fueled the entire system: massive quantities of dried maize, beans, and squash stored in vast communal granaries. The heartbeat of this network, its undisputed nexus, was the city of Cahokia, located near modern-day St. Louis at the confluence of the Missouri, Mississippi, and Illinois rivers. Its location was no accident. It was the strategic hub where the entire inland waterway system met. At its peak around 1100 CE, Cahokia was a metropolis of perhaps 20,000 people, a population that would not be surpassed by any city in the United States until the late 18th century. Its skyline was dominated by over 120 flat-topped earthen mounds, including the colossal Monk's Mound, a 10-story earthen pyramid that covered more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza at its base. This was not just a city of farmers, it was a theocratic capital, a pilgrimage site, and the Wall Street of the Native American world. Traders from hundreds of miles away would have paddled into its harbors, their canoes brimming with copper, shells, pipestone, mica, and salt. They would exchange these for Cahokia's manufactured goods, expertly crafted pottery, intricately woven textiles, and perhaps most importantly, the city's agricultural surplus, which allowed for the specialization of labor and supported a class of priests, artisans, and administrators. The goods moving along these waterways were far more than mere commodities. They were physical manifestations of religious and political power, a conch shell trumpet from the Gulf, engraved with intricate imagery and filled with a rare pigment, wasn't just a trophy, it was a sacred object that legitimized a chief's authority. A sheet of copper from Lake Superior, fashioned into a ceremonial axe, was a symbol of a warrior's connection to the powerful forces of the underworld. This constant flow of ritual items helped to create a shared religious and artistic culture across vast distances, what archaeologists call the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex. Common motifs like the falcon warrior, the cross and circle symbol, and the hand and die design appear on artifacts from Oklahoma to Florida, from Wisconsin to Georgia, testifying to a sphere of shared beliefs and ideologies that were disseminated and reinforced through this extensive trade. The legacy of this network did not end with the decline of Cahokia around 1350 CE or the catastrophic arrival of European diseases. When French explorers like Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet canoed down the Mississippi in the 17th century, they did not discover a wilderness. They entered a well-established indigenous world that was still actively using these ancient riverine trade routes. They encountered powerful chiefdoms like the Qhapaq and the Natchez, who were the direct heirs to this Mississippian tradition, and they quickly inserted themselves into the existing trade patterns, swapping European-manufactured goods like glass beads, metal tools, and guns for furs. In many ways, the French voyageurs simply adopted the same canoe-based logistics that had been perfected by Native Americans centuries earlier. Today, the legacy of this pathway is preserved in the countless shell and copper artifacts displayed in museums, in the enduring presence of the mounds that still dot the landscape, and in the vibrant trading traditions of modern Native American communities. It stands as a powerful testament to the ingenuity of pre-Columbian societies and a crucial reminder that North America was a land of ancient and sophisticated connections long before the first European ship ever appeared on the horizon. Now we turn to a pathway defined not by grand imperial design, but by sheer, stark necessity, a desperate and ingenious dance along the very edge of oblivion. Picture the most brutal desert you can imagine, the Taklamakan, a vast, shifting sea of sand dunes in the heart of Central Asia, a place whose name famously translates to, "You go in, but you won't come out." For traders on the main Silk Road, this was the ultimate death trap, a void to be avoided at all costs. But avoidance did not mean abandonment. Instead, a brilliant solution emerged, a network of routes that clung to the desert's rim, tracing a precarious line between the barren wasteland and the life-sustaining foothills of the Tian Shan and Kunlun Mountains. These were the Tarim Basin routes, a series of oasis highways that turned a terrifying barrier into a corridor of incredible cultural fusion. The key to survival, and thus to trade, was a chain of lush, startling oases that dotted the basin's perimeter like a string of emeralds set against bronze. Towns like Kashgar, Yarkand, Cotton, and Turpan became more than just pit stops. They were thriving, independent city-states, each a self-sufficient fortress of culture and commerce. Their existence was a miracle of adaptation. In Turpan, they developed an astonishing underground irrigation system called Karez, a network of tunnels that tapped into subterranean aquifers from the mountains, bringing water for miles to nourish vineyards and fields in the scorching heat. It was here that some of the world's sweetest grapes were grown and dried into raisins, a prized commodity for travelers. Each oasis offered its own unique treasures. Cotton became famous for its exquisite jade and hand-woven carpets, while Kashgar, at the crossroads of the basin, exploded into a cacophonous melting pot where a dozen languages could be heard in its bustling Sunday market. This was the ultimate meeting point of worlds. The Tarim Basin became a sprawling, open-air museum of human migration and exchange. For centuries, it was inhabited by a fascinating array of Indo-European peoples like the Tocharians, whose mummified remains have been shockingly well preserved by the dry desert air. These ancient individuals, with their tall frames, light hair, and woven tartan clothing, seem utterly out of place in a Central Asian desert, yet they built sophisticated cultures here. They were later joined by waves of Turkic migrants from the north and Chinese administrators and soldiers from the east. The result was a society of breathtaking hybridity. A Buddhist monastery might be built in a Chinese architectural style, but house statues of the Buddha with distinctly Greco-Roman features, a legacy of Alexander the Great's long-lost influence. A local king might have a Tocharian name, wear Scythian-style trousers, and practice a form of Buddhism that had been filtered through Persia. The most profound export that traveled these oasis routes was not silk or jade, but an entire system of belief, Buddhism. It was through the Tarim Basin that Buddhism made its gradual, centuries-long journey from India into China. Monks from Central Asia, rather than Indians themselves, were often the key missionaries. They translated Sanskrit texts into local languages and then into Chinese, painstakingly adapting complex Indian philosophical concepts for a Chinese audience. The caves of Dunhuang at the basin's eastern end became a legendary library of this spiritual exchange, where thousands of manuscripts and stunning wall paintings documented the blending of Indian, Persian, Chinese, and Central Asian artistic traditions. This was the slow, patient work of cultural translation that happened in the oasis towns, far from the glare of imperial courts. The strategic importance of this region was never lost on the great empires of China. Control of the Tarim Basin routes meant control of the Silk Road's northern and southern branches, and with it, immense prestige and wealth. The Han Dynasty first projected power here, but it was during the magnificent Tang Dynasty that Chinese influence reached its zenith. The Tang, with their capital at Chang'an, itself a wildly cosmopolitan city, actively protected these routes, establishing military garrisons and marrying their princesses to local kings to secure alliances. The famous monk Xuanzang, whose journey inspired the classic Journey to the West, traveled these very paths on his way to India, carefully documenting the unique cultures of each oasis kingdom he passed through. His writings provide an invaluable snapshot of a world in constant, vibrant flux. The legacy of this adaptability echoes into the modern era, where the region, now China's Xinjiang province, remains a strategically vital and culturally complex crossroads, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient, life-giving pathways that taught humanity how to thrive at the edge of the impossible. While the Amber Road carried the tears of the gods and the Tea-Horse Road moved leaves and steeds, the very strength of Rome itself, the literal iron in its backbone traveled along a different, equally vital network. This was the Roman Iron Road, a sprawling, industrial-grade supply chain that connected the empire's raw material sources to its voracious forges, workshops, and battlefields. If the Appian Way was the empire's majestic front door, this was the gritty, essential service entrance that kept the entire household running, a pathway dedicated not to luxury or faith, but to pure, unadulterated power. The story of this network begins deep underground, in places like the mines of Noricum, a province in the Alps corresponding to modern-day Austria. The Noric iron ore was legendary, renowned throughout the Mediterranean world for its exceptional quality. Roman metallurgists prized it for its natural hardness and its supposed self-tempering properties, which allegedly allowed blades to be quenched in mere water instead of oil, yet emerge incredibly strong and resilient. This reputation was so potent that the Roman poet Ovid simply referred to a high-quality sword as a Noric blade, a brand name built on centuries of proven performance. But Noricum was far from the only source. Massive mining operations in Gaul, Britain, Spain, and Elba fed the empire's insatiable appetite for iron. These were not small-scale digs, they were industrial landscapes. At places like Rio Tinto in Spain, archaeologists have found evidence of vast open-cast mines, huge water wheels used for dewatering the deep pits, and mountains of slag, the waste product left over from smelting, that still dominate the terrain today. The scale of production was staggering, a testament to a systematic, state-driven extraction industry. Getting this raw ore from these remote, mountainous regions to where it was needed was a Herculean logistical feat. The first leg of the journey relied on the empire's unparalleled road network and river systems. Ox-drawn carts, their wheels groaning under the weight, would haul the ore down from the mines to the nearest navigable river. There, it would be loaded onto broad, flat-bottomed barges and floated downstream to major manufacturing hubs. The Rhine and Danube rivers became particularly crucial arteries for this trade, as they were not only transport routes but also the site of the empire's most heavily fortified and demanding military frontiers. The legions stationed along these rivers were the primary customers for this industrial output, and the supply chain was ruthlessly efficient in serving them. Major Roman towns like Augustogenum in Gaul or Sirmium on the Danube evolved into centers of armament manufacture, their economies dominated by the clang of hammers and the roar of furnaces. Once the ore reached these hubs, the real transformation began. Roman ironworking was a sophisticated, multi-stage process. The ore was first smelted in bloomery furnaces, producing a spongy mass of iron called a bloom. This bloom was then repeatedly heated and hammered by skilled blacksmiths to remove impurities, a process known as forging. What set Roman production apart was its move towards standardization and scale. While local smiths still produced tools for farmers, state-run fabrici or workshops began to mass-produce military equipment. They churned out identical spearheads, sword blades, and the iconic lorica segmentata, the plate armor worn by legionaries with interchangeable parts. This was military-industrial complex on an ancient scale. The finished goods, crates of swords, bundles of spearheads, and barrels of nails, were then shipped back out along the same road and river network, destined for frontier forts, public works projects, and the legions themselves. The impact of this iron network rippled far beyond the military. The same workshops that produced swords also made the tools that built the empire, the sturdy iron picks and shovels for mining and construction, the heavy plowshares that tilled the fields of Gaul and Britain, the axes that cleared forests, and the countless nails that held Roman cities together. Every Roman aqueduct, bridge, and basilica was literally fastened with iron from this system. Furthermore, the movement of ore and smiths facilitated a crucial exchange of technology. As Roman legions and administrators moved into new provinces, they brought their advanced metallurgical techniques with them. Local smiths in Britain or Dacia learned Roman methods for producing higher quality steel and more efficient tools. In return, the Romans sometimes adopted local innovations, creating a feedback loop of technological improvement that spread across the provinces. This industrial pathway, often overlooked in favor of more glamorous trade routes, was the unsung hero of the Roman Empire. It provided the literal nuts and bolts, the nails, the weapons, the tools that built, fed, and defended a civilization, proving that the most enduring connections are often those forged in fire and hammered out on the anvil of necessity. As we step back from the intricate details of each individual route, from the Silk Road's sprawling exchanges to the Inca's mountain stairways and the Mississippi's riverine trade, a set of powerful, unifying themes begins to crystallize. These 22 pathways, despite their vast differences in geography, culture, and purpose, all whisper the same fundamental truth about human civilization. The first and perhaps most obvious is the inextricable link between trade and power. Time and again, we see that empires were not built by sword and spear alone. They were financed and sustained by the flow of commodities. The wealth of Rome was underwritten by Spanish silver and Noric iron. The glory of Mali was quite literally built on gold and salt from the Trans-Saharan routes. The Maya city-states used networks of Sacbyob to trade jade and cacao, the currencies of both ritual and rule. Commerce provided the economic engine for monumental construction, for raising armies, and for projecting influence across continents. It was the lifeblood that sustained the heart of empire, proving that economic interconnection has always been a primary driver of political expansion. Yet, to focus solely on the movement of goods is to miss the deeper, more transformative impact of these networks. They were the original social media platforms, the primordial World Wide Web for the exchange of ideas. A Buddhist monk hitching a ride on a Silk Road caravan didn't just carry his own beliefs. He was a node in a network that would eventually transmit Buddhism from India to China, Korea, and Japan, reshaping the spiritual landscape of half the world. The mathematical concept of zero, developed in India, traveled these same paths to the Islamic world and then to Europe, revolutionizing mathematics and science. The architectural styles of Persia influenced builders in Samarkand, which in turn echoed in the designs of the Mughals. This was not a simple process of copying. It was a creative fusion, a constant remixing of technologies, art, religions, and philosophies. These pathways facilitated a millennia-long conversation between cultures, resulting in the hybrid vigor that has always driven human progress forward. They remind us that cultural purity is a modern myth. Every great civilization is, in fact, a magnificent mosaic of borrowed and blended influences. Perhaps the most humbling theme is the breathtaking ingenuity required to overcome the brutal indifference of geography. Human ambition met Earth's most formidable obstacles and, through sheer brilliance and determination, found a way. The builders of the Qhapaq carved stone staircases into the vertiginous faces of the Andes. The traders of the incense route memorized the location of every life-saving oasis in the trackless Rub al-Khali desert. The Maya engineered raised plaster causeways to stay above floodwaters, while the nomads of the Eurasian steppe domesticated the horse to conquer the endless grassland. There was no mountain too high, no desert too wide, no river too raging that it could not be transformed from a barrier into a bridge. This relentless drive to connect, to reach beyond the known horizon, is one of humanity's defining traits. These pathways are monuments to that spirit of innovation, a testament to our ability to reshape the world not through destruction, but through the clever and persistent application of knowledge. This deep interdependence fostered by these networks often led to something else, periods of remarkable peace and stability. The famous Pax Mongolica is the clearest example, where the Mongol Empire's ruthless control over the steppe routes made travel so safe that it supercharged trade and cultural exchange between East and West. But we see smaller-scale examples everywhere. The neutrality of the Maya Sacbyob, where even warring city-states allowed safe passage for traders and diplomats. The protection offered by the Persian Royal Road, which made commerce viable and profitable for countless merchants. When societies become economically intertwined, the cost of conflict rises. It creates a vested interest in stability, a powerful incentive to resolve disputes through negotiation rather than warfare. These ancient networks created a form of proto-globalization where prosperity was linked to peaceful connection, a lesson that feels incredibly relevant in our own interconnected world. Ultimately, the most profound takeaway from these 22 pathways is how they completely shatter our modern conception of borders. The world they reveal is one of fluid zones of influence, of overlapping cultural spheres, of constant movement and exchange. A Roman citizen in York might use lamp oil from North Africa, wear silk from China, and be paid with silver mined in Spain. A cotton trader might practice Buddhism from India, write in a script derived from Persia, and sell jade to a customer from Xi'an. The lines we see on modern maps, the sharp, bold divisions between nations, would have been utterly incomprehensible to the people who traveled these routes. Their identity was not solely defined by the patch of land they were born on, but also by the vast web of connections they participated in. They understood that progress was not achieved through isolation, but through connectivity. By studying these forgotten pathways, we gain a crucial historical perspective on our own era of globalization, trade disputes, and cultural tension. We see that the challenges and opportunities of interconnection are not new. They are the fundamental story of human history. These ancient networks offer us a mirror, reflecting both the immense benefits of a connected world and the perennial challenges of managing it, reminding us that we are simply the latest chapter in a very long story of reaching out and finding our place in a wider world. From the shimmering silk that connected Rome and Chang'an to the copper and shell-laden canoes that plied the Mississippi, these 22 forgotten pathways reveal a profound truth. Our world has always been intricately connected. Long before the sharp, definitive lines of modern borders were drawn on maps, humanity was weaving a complex tapestry of exchange, a web of trails and tracks that pulsed with the movement of goods, ideas, and aspirations. This was not a world of isolated civilizations, but a dynamic, interlinked system where the fate of an emperor in China could be influenced by a miner in Austria, and where the spiritual life of a Maya priest was shaped by goods traded from hundreds of miles away. These routes stand as monumental testaments to a time when connection, not division, was the default state of human progress. What these ancient networks teach us is a timeless lesson in resilience and innovation. Consider the sheer audacity of the human spirit required to conquer these landscapes. We see it in the Maya engineers who raised white plaster causeways above the floodwaters of the rainforest, in the Berber guides who could navigate the featureless expanse of the Sahara by reading the stars, and in the Inca builders who suspended grass fiber bridges over dizzying Andean gorges. They did not have satellites or GPS. They had knowledge passed down through generations and an unwavering determination to reach beyond their horizon. This ingenuity wasn't just about overcoming geography. It was about solving the complex problems of logistics, communication, and cultural translation. The Persian royal mail system, with its relay of riders, was an ancient information superhighway. The standardized production along the Roman Iron Road was a precursor to industrial manufacturing. These were solutions born from necessity, proving that the human drive to connect is the ultimate mother of invention. At its heart, this drive speaks to a universal human desire for exchange and connection that transcends mere commerce. Yes, the caravans carried gold, salt, and silk, but they also carried something far more precious: understanding. A Buddhist sutra traveling from India to China along the Silk Road wasn't just a commodity. It was a new way of seeing the universe. The artistic motifs that spread from Teotihuacan to distant Maya cities were more than just decoration. They were a shared visual language of power and belief. These pathways facilitated a constant, slow-motion conversation between cultures, allowing them to borrow, adapt, and blend in ways that enriched everyone involved. They created a world where identity was fluid and multifaceted, where a person could be a citizen of their local town and also a participant in a vast transnational network of ideas. This ancient form of globalization was built on a foundation of mutual interest and curiosity, a stark contrast to the often coercive or purely exploitative models we sometimes see today. As we face our own modern challenges, from navigating the complexities of economic globalization to addressing the existential threat of climate change, these ancient examples offer us powerful lessons in cooperation and adaptability. The success of these pathways relied on a delicate, often unspoken, ecosystem of cooperation. The safe passage of a caravan across the Sahara depended on treaties with dozens of different tribes. The vitality of the Tea-Horse Road was built on a symbiotic relationship between two vastly different cultures that each held something the other desperately needed. They demonstrate that our greatest challenges are rarely solved in isolation. They require collaboration across cultures and a willingness to see our fates as intertwined. Furthermore, these civilizations were masters of adaptation. They did not try to conquer their environments with brute force alone. They learned to work with them. The Korez irrigation systems in the Taklamakan Desert, the camel's unique physiology that made the Trans-Saharan routes possible, the use of monsoon winds to power the Maritime Silk Road, these are all examples of observing natural systems and adapting human activity to fit within them, a lesson in sustainability we are urgently relearning today. Ultimately, this journey through history reminds us that the past is not a distant country filled with irrelevant facts. It is a living library of human experience, and understanding the threads that bind us together is the key to navigating our future. The borders that define our world today are recent inventions, and while they serve a purpose, they can also blind us to the deeper, older connections that have always shaped our species. By remembering these forgotten pathways, we reclaim a narrative of shared humanity, of resilience, and of incredible creativity. We are reminded that our story has always been one of movement, mixing, and mutual discovery. So, we would love to hear from you which of these 22 pathways captured your imagination the most. Was it the legendary Silk Road, the ingenious Qhapaq, or perhaps the unexpected reach of the Mississippi Trade Network? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey through the lost connections of empires, please subscribe for more adventures into history's greatest mysteries. Thank you for exploring